mean, hopefully anything I say today, you guys will forget about it tonight after the uniform arrival. But no, good morning. Good to see everybody. Just want to start off by just thanking everybody that's been involved in this process up to this point. Our entire personnel department. And look, when I say personnel, it's not just scouts. That's, football information, football tech, our ops, support, everybody. So it's really been all hands on deck. I want to thank our area scouts. Those guys did a great job. I thought that we had our best April meetings since we've been here. That's kind of when they kind of tie the bow up on all the work that they've done throughout the whole year. So I thought it was awesome. Wanted to highlight Brian Hudspeth, our college director. This is his first full-time year in this role, and I thought he did a great job leading and organizing and everything that comes along with being in that role. The rest of our execs, Ray Agnew, John Dorsey, Mike Martin, Don Corzine, those guys are key cogs in this process in extremely critical roles. So appreciate everything that they did. Want to thank Dan, the entire coaching staff. They play a huge part in our process, very critical roles as well. So appreciate all their time and effort in it. And we're in a good spot right now. Questions?
How did it feel being, the first 2 years you guys had high picks.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I ain't gonna say can't miss guys, but
Yeah.
29th. How much is a challenge is that to you, just with the 29th?
Yeah, it's just, you got to just wrap your head around. You're kind of looking at a different level of player. And it's just, it is what it is. I don't want to say it's any less pressure because you got to get every single pick right as well. At least that's the standard that we hold ourselves to, whether at 29 or whether it's been at 7 or 6 or 2 or, all those things. So we just take the same approach, but it's not, I don't see it as any more or less pressure. I just think it's probably, I don't know, maybe less heralded, I don't know if people even are still hanging around or even remembering, who picked, 31 or, it seems like everybody's kind of already celebrating 1 through 15 or something. But no, we just kind of stick to the same process. You just got to just get your head around the players, and we've been doing this long enough to know, like, all right, probably not going to be in the mix on some of those guys. And it's something I picked up when we were in LA, and did not have even a first-round pick for a long time. So you can kind of expedite it to the guys that you think you will be looking at.
Brad, I wanted to ask you about the idea of trading up early in the draft. We've seen you do it with Jameson a couple of years ago. This organization is built through the draft. That's a big part of the philosophy
Yep.
here. So what goes into it from a philosophical standpoint of giving up draft assets to go get one guy? What do you need to see? What boxes need to be checked? And because the organization's where it's at now, just with the roster depth and everything,
Yeah.
is it easier to make a decision like that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Justin. It's first of all, it's got to be the right guy, and you guys seen us, how we've operated in the past. If it's just the player that we want, we're just going to go and get them. But there is a lot of boxes that needs to be checked. I think we kind of said a little bit at the end of the season. Everybody can't play here, so it's got to be identified. That player has to be identified as, okay, he's checked all those boxes, he's the right pick and he's the right fit. And also it's just how high you talking. Is it way high? Is it just a few spots? But either one, obviously when you trade up for a player, you've identified them. But me and Dan have been saying it from day one, it just has to be the right fit. There's going to be some talented players that you guys have all been looking at on mock drafts and stuff that that just may not be good fits, and that's okay, and we're fine with that. But look, if it's a guy that we really want, we'll definitely make an effort if it makes sense. It just sometimes it might not make sense. You got to look at what you're giving up. It's a good question you brought up of where the roster's at. You got to look at expiring contracts coming up, and it's just a lot that goes into it. But that's a good question.
The strat ties into that because I think everyone respects the foundation built through the draft. But how do you balance the maximizing the window that you're in now, right? Like Super Bowl contention with people say Julio Jones trade, right? We go way up, or Eflin picks like the Rams did.
Yeah.
At what point in roster construction do you, get to that point? Does that sort of thought in your mind like this is where all in for like?
Yeah, I don't really base it off of windows really. Again, it's just how much of an impactful player do you want to get? So I'm just trying to think. Like, look, if there was I think I told you guys last year. Like, we had what 6 and 18 originally, and we were looking to trade up from 18. If we stayed how it stayed. So that didn't really depend on, like the window that we were in or anything. It's just that those are some players that we really, really wanted to have. And that's, we kind of had in our mind that was going to be the plan. It kind of worked out a little bit differently. You got to be prepared for everything. But, I understand the question because you're like, okay, all right, the roster's at a certain point. Okay, you guys are, should be contenders heading into the season. So, okay, how do you operate this way? But again, I just think if we just keep improving every single year through doing it through our process, that's what we've been doing, and that's what we'll continue to do. And I think when you start getting into, well, we got this window, so we got to do this, we got to pivot, and that's when I think you kind of get a little bit in trouble.
Brad, in your group's evaluation of the cornerbacks prospects, just how does this group rank among the cornerbacks that you've evaluated over the last couple of years?
I mean, it's a solid group. I don't think it's really far from. I think I made a comment just the other week, just kind of looking at the whole class. I think it's very normal of previous drafts in terms of the guys that I think probably are true legit day one guys or day two guys. So I think it's pretty normal. Again, they're always different, but in terms of numbers of guys that are in those like top rounds, I think it's very similar.
Brad, Justin asked about potentially trading up. My question is the other way. With the unique dynamic of having the pick in Detroit, how much of a Godfather offer would you have to get to move out of 29 with 150,000 people in the streets waiting for your pick?
Look, that's a fair question, and it's something. It's something that we have to do the right thing for the organization, and if it makes sense and it lines up and it's the right thing to do, then we have to do the right thing. And so say that happens where the fans have been waiting there all night for this pick, and we get an offer that we really can't turn down and makes sense. We got to do the right thing, and hopefully our fans will forgive us, and hopefully that they'll forgive us. Now we won't expect immediate forgiveness right then and there, but hopefully when the season starts and that player that we end up selecting, there's like, okay, all right, we can kind of get past but no, I totally understand that. Obviously with the fans there, first of all, I'm so excited about the draft being in Detroit. Yeah, I really am. It's just another opportunity for our franchise, our city, just for the world to kind of migrate to downtown Detroit. We have multiple major NFL markets that are within driving distance, so I expect it to be pretty packed. I'm excited for the local businesses, so I think it's gonna be really exciting. But all that being said, I know the perfect storm is okay. Get to the pick, it stays there. They've been waiting all night, and you make the pick, and everybody's happy. But if it's the best thing for the organization, we got to do what's right. And I'll just do a PSA, public apology later. We'll roll. Eric, I'll get you. Go ahead.
By the last year, the COVID thing with the college players and the older players coming in, do you consider this a strong draft class overall? And you rated this is your fourth, I think.
Yep.
Of the four, this draft class, where do you put that in over the four draft class today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought this draft is a little bit more normalized to what, not like last year. I don't want to say weaker draft, but it was less guys that you would have as true first round prospects last year, and then I thought this year's more kind of like previous years before the 23 draft. But I still think it's a good class. I think the other component is guys that are not coming out. It's because of, the college landscape has changed. So outside of just the COVID deal with players that have had more experience and are a little bit older, it's a lot of players that we've looked at that we thought were going to come out that ended up not declaring, and I think that's a big effect of what the college landscape is right now.
I'm saying, looking at your last 3 draft classes, and I did some research a little bit. So it's been 5 Pro Bowlers that you got. Only like 3. That's 3 more than any previous. The Rams got had 2 in that time span. I guess looking at your process, what's made it so unique? Not going. I know you probably don't want to go too much detail, but just what's made it so unique? Why you been able to find, right, can't miss guys, 5 Pro? That's a lot of guys that have that.
Eric, I just think we make sure we're convicted on every single pick, and like what you guys have heard me say, there's no secret. It's about the right football player. Like, as long as we're convicted on the football player, then you sleep good at night. And that's really, and that's a lot of work that goes into getting convicted on the right player. I mean, we just had 30 visits, things we have, medical like it's a lot of stuff that is like, okay, this is the right guy. We're still looking at tape now, so it's a lot that gets to that conviction. But as long as like Dan and I are really aligned and convicted, and we're so like this guy fits, and not getting into the and I think at the owners' meetings, those questions asked about like drafting an outside corner. Like, well, how you haven't? No, we draft the right football player we're convicted on. If the outside corner was the right football player we're convicted on, then we would take that player. So we don't really get anchored on positions. We don't really get anchored on windows. We don't get anchored on. It's just like, it's only 1 draft a year, and it's a lot of work that goes into it. So that's our recipe. We just kind of look for guys that we're convicted on that are right fits for us, and we don't get into the premium positions and all. Look, you can pick another position, and that don't mean that the guy's the right fit. I know you guys were asking after the last draft, well, how come you guys didn't pick another position? It's like, well, no, it's not another position. Who? Which player? You don't just pick whatever the premium position is. You don't just pick that player because he plays that position. No, he has to be the right football player, and that's what we stuck to, and it's worked so far for us.
That draft recipe, you go for the talent, not the need. Does that necessarily start to change as you have gotten better and better, your roster's gotten better and better? Do you start to eyeball a particular thing more so than you did when you first got here?
No, that's a really good question, because, when we first got here, we had a ton of needs. So we could go for the most talented guy, or the guy that really fit the most. We could have gotten so many different directions. And then that resulted to a lot of young players having to play early and got a lot of experience. Really, with where the roster is now, I actually think you even have more flexibility to not be anchored into a need. Again, we try to do the best we can in free agency in terms of plugging holes and pulling out the depth chart and do all those things. But and we feel that we did a great job in free agency, and we're in position to go whichever direction that we want to go. So I actually get more comfort of how the roster's now. It's less of, well, we really need this. Well, we need the depth here. We need that. It's more. We've always said best player, but it's more emphasized now.
Brad, how is the asking about trading back out of the first round?
Yeah.
How much value is there actually, though, when we're at 29, trading back in the high, really early into the second round, where you get to reset your board, reconvene, examine, you're almost getting like the best of the best in the second
Yep.
round.
Yeah. It's a really good question, Carlos, because it depends on a couple of factors. It's all right. You have a pool of players, and say you're at your pick at, we're at 29, and you get an offer that gets somewhere in the 30s, early on day 2. If you're pretty much convicted, these are kind of the same players, regardless of position. You're getting the same level of player. Is it a good starter? Is it a developmental high upside backup? Whatever the case is, you feel like, I'm happy with either one. And so I always kind of go back to the, you get them in, ranges, you're not going to argue. Don't spend a lot of time arguing going to Grand Cayman or Turks and Caicos. You're not going to be mad either way. So when you're happy with the decision of, if we come away with any of these guys, you kind of do the math. You're like, okay, we trade back here. Some of these guys will be left, and we'll be happy, and we should get some capital. Or is it we go back to that conviction conversation? No, this is that guy that we have been convicted on. We're not moving, and we're just going to stay put. And whatever extra capital you get on the back end, it's really not worth it. So let's just go ahead and pick. So those are the factors you got to weigh.
So when you guys have built the team, like you guys have gone through the offensive line in a lot of ways, right? Built through the trenches. Two questions about that. Was that a foundational thing that you, like a belief that you guys have had, or was it a product of circumstance, like who you inherited and they've been there? And then two, how do you sort of view your offensive line long term? Or do you think that needs that you can have there?
Yeah, we're firm believers that that's where the game is won. I'm sure you've heard that before, but that's the foundation. That's the core of our team. Yeah, there's some guys in place already, so it was less work that needed to be done. Now the pieces that we've added with the guys that were previously here have just fortified it and made it even stronger. But again, like you guys asked me about, I think end of the season, that's always going to be like most important. That's something it's hard to overlook. I don't care who you got at quarterback. I don't care if you got more of a pocket guy, a scram. I don't care what it is. Offensive line, it's critical, and if when you don't have them, it can make life hard in a lot of different areas. We had to do more work on the defensive side of the ball, and we had to, it wasn't a lot of pieces there when we got here, so we had to do a lot more work there. But it's always of utmost importance, and we feel really good about our offensive line now. We love what we did in free agency. I feel like we could line down and play now and be totally fine. And so it's going to be whoever, if we do add somebody, it's going to be hard to crack one of those big boys up front. So
build up of Kenny's question a little bit, because I think COVID-19 and the transfer portal and all that kind of melded together. We're coming out of that now with the portal and maybe NIL to an extent. Intangibles are so important for you. Has it made it easier to identify football character and the ability to battle through adversity? I guess those evaluations for you.
Yeah, everybody has a different play, different story. I'm meeting a lot of these kids and sitting down with them to hear their reasonings for their decisions. It's been really fascinating because they've all been different. So on the surface, I used to think just that. Like I was like, oh, well, it wasn't going. But no, when you really hear what went through these kids' decisions to jump into the portal, they're all different, and I respect them. And it's a lot more in depth in a lot of cases than I thought.
How does this receiver class stack up to some of the classes we've seen in the past, and what type of opportunities, you guys have strengthened that room, but what type of opportunities for you guys to potentially add to that group?
Yeah, I think it's a solid receiver group. It's there's some guys that's gonna should be able to contribute immediately, but in terms of my opinion of strength, that's always subjective. That's what makes the draft so fascinating is, what our draft board is. There's 31 other draft boards. They may think that it's not as good or, so we'll just keep those to ourselves. But I do think there's some receivers that's going to be able to contribute pretty early, I would think, in this class.
Brad, you mentioned how much work goes into preparing and looking into different guys, whether it's scouting them, whether it's meeting with them. How quickly do you figure out that guy's a Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes type of guy? Is it something like you get in a room and that's it? Or how quickly do you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, some of them, they declare themselves pretty early. I credit our area scouts. They do so much work on the front end and the back end where they tee it up for us very, very well, and they kind of already have the kid nailed, really, and just say, like, look, this is who this player is, and you might meet him and it lines up exactly, And so some kind of declare themselves pretty early. Some guys, you sit down with at the combine, and it's like, yep, this is exactly who the scout said that he was going to be, and he knocked it out the park, boom, boom, boom. Some, it might be a little different. They nothing on the scouts, but kid might have been nervous. He didn't really show his personality, and then we might bring him in for a 30 visit. We might spend time with him at a pro day or something, and get to know him a little bit more. And that's happened in this process already, where just in some of these visits and some of these pro day visits, it's been like, oh wow, I feel a lot better about him being a figure.
Has the last two, Tim and Justin, has the change in the kickoff rule changed your process at all? I mean, do you find yourself maybe going back and looking at a guy's freshman year when he returned kicks and stuff, and has that changed the evaluation?
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussions about that, Tim. I think we're still in, let's call it exploratory stages in terms from a personnel standpoint. We have an idea of what we think is going to be the right fit. So it has tweaked it a little bit, especially on the return aspect. You might be looking for a different kind of return than you have been in the past, and vice versa on the other side, on your actual kickoff team. Trying to find your kickoff team and your return unit that does that body type change? Does that type of player change? Does the movement skills change? So we've had a lot of discussion on that. Obviously, you guys know special teams is high priority here, and but I have all the faith in Dan and Phip that we're going to have the right guys for it.
I think since the time you've got here, you always talk about anchors, and
Yeah.
it's a self-reflective thing, and just you don't want to get anchored on a guy. Is that a constant internal battle, just the self-awareness of it? And I know you've talked about in the past, like being talked out of, maybe going to get a guy.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost some people in your front office, David Lance, who's maybe your get-back guy,
Mm-hmm.
the guy that holds you back from making those bold moves these days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably harder than a lot of, it maybe realize on the surface, just because it's not really, we try to lay out our process to avoid those anchors. Really, it's probably more of the groupthink and the influence that's even a greater threat to our process. That's just human nature, and people naturally want to be a part of the tribe, and they want to get along, and people naturally they want to agree and be likable, and it takes work to go against the grain. It takes a lot of work, and that's why I always have a lot of respect for the lone wolf. When we're in there and everybody's saying yes, 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 and it's some obvious prospect, it's that one person in that room. And I was like, I don't, and that's, I'm not saying, oh, no, I'm like, no, I want to listen to him, or I want to listen to her. I want to listen to that person, because that was a lone wolf, and it takes a lot to be that lone wolf, and I just have a lot of respect for that person. But yeah, the anchors, we try to set our process to avoid them, but again, it's really the groupthink and group influence that is probably even more of a danger than those anchors.
That's all. When you hear that lone wolf, like, does that cause you to go back then and watch the film, or how does that impact you?
Yeah, it might be something that, because sometimes I'm the lone wolf. I might be the lone wolf. I tell you, me and Dan were the lone wolf, on a player that we took last year, and it worked out, So it's not
questioning them before you got into it.
No, like, we loved the player. The rest of the group were like, no, get this guy at the same position, and so it may be something that you already knew, and you got confirmation. So if I'm the lone wolf and everybody else is completely different than me, no one really knows what I think, and I'm listening to everybody, I'm like, man, I need to go back and look. I missed something, and I have the confidence and the humility to do that. But because I have so much respect for the process, it's an art form. It's the best thing about scouting is you get 20 people, 10 people, however many, looking at the same film in a dark room, and you got 10 different opinions. That's what's awesome about it. So when I'm the lone wolf and everybody's the opposite, I'm like, man, I need to look back and see if I missed something. If I hear the lone wolf that matched up with what I thought, I'm like, oh, at least that person saw it. But everybody else still was the same. So it just depends on, but if I saw something what the rest of the group says and the lone wolf says something different, oh, damn right, I'm going to go back and look and see, because that person's in the room for a reason, and I got a lot of respect for that person's evaluations.
You said Brad matched up with what you said, so you listen to everyone's opinion before sharing your own. I guess. Is that-
Yeah, basically.
Will you share who that player was?
No.
Thank you, guys.
All right.